Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures, and today we're going to be doing part 85 of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights, where we take a look at some of the wonderful mods people have been making, and then compare them to the wonderful biodiversity that we share our world with. So, today we've got a lot of fish, but we've also got a couple really cool weird animals that I'm really excited to talk about. Very interesting bunch of critters. So, yeah, we're going to be starting off with some, obviously, fish. It's been a lot of fish recently. It's kind of how it is sometimes with the fish mods. But we're going to have a look at the banded tilapia, done by Leaf, Buffsu, and Fishing Planet as a port from there. And these little guys here. So let's see if we can find one swimming around. There we are. So, the banded tilapia, also known as the Vetulicola, these guys are a type of cichlid that are found in warm waters, especially fresh water, in southern Africa. So they can mainly be found around the Congo River basin, also Lake Malawi, the Zambezi, the Orange River, Okavango Delta. Places like that, they're quite a common fish in those regards. And they prefer water with ample plant cover, and they will occasionally range naturally as far north as Tanzania and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And in terms of their introduction, they've been introduced locally to some river systems in the Northern Hemisphere, just for people to hunt and things like that. A really, really awesome fish. So in terms of their size and description, these guys typically get about 23.5 centimeters, or about 9.3 inches in length. So biggest fish, they get heaviest about 445 grams, so a little under half a kilogram. So not the hugest fish, but they are quite important food fish. And you can see here there are quite a smaller species in that regard. They've got deep bodies with narrow heads, and they've got these strong jaws that allow them to hunt their food. And they can often appear in this rich yellow or brown bands, where they get their name, the banded, of course, tilapia. You can see these orange bands going on here. And then they also have these red-orange fin margins, and the adults have very dark prominent stripes, as you can see down here, with a patch of scarlet ones on their head, as you can kind of see around here. Very, very interesting fish, if I do say so myself. And these guys are found in widely distributed habitats, so they can be found in a lot of different habitats. They favor ones with plant cover, and then exist along the edge of rivers and things like that, but they tend to be confined to shallow, weedy areas, so they do not build up large populations in deep lakes, and they seem to be cold confined, so they do not like the cold. In terms of their diet, adults are omnivores, where they feed on both animal and plant matter. They just eat a little bit of everything. And preferably on algae, and then aquatic macrophytes and vegetable material of terrestrial origin is best for these guys, so things like leaves of plants, etc. So they're mainly herbivores, but juveniles will also feed on small crustaceans and midget larvae, just to help them grow up a little faster. And these guys are a substrate spawner, so males and females will form pairs to rear their young, and they undergo seasonal migrations and breeds before and during these migrations. And they are actually may shoal together, and they guard their own eggs, though it's not known if they're a mouth brooder, like several other tilapia species. So we don't really know that about them, but still really cool fish. In terms of their uses, these are small species, and they usually unlikely play a role in capture fisheries, but in cultures they are sometimes exploited. And they're also a forage fish for bass, and popular angling species for among young and inexperienced anglers, as a gateway species to people new to angling. So something just easy for people to learn how to angle fish with. And yeah, really, really cool little guy. Again, done by Leaf, Buffsu, and ported from Fishing Planet. Next one, we've got one from free 3D models, and also ported in by Leaf and Buffsu. We've got the Bozemans rainbow fish. A really, really cool little guy here. Look how pretty he is. So the Bozemans rainbow fish, also known as the Bozemans rainbow fish, they're a species in the family Melatonidae, and these guys are endemic. That means they're only found in the Aramara lakes and their tributaries in the mountainous regions of the Bird Heads Peninsula, which is in Western Papua in Indonesia. So they round about Papua New Guinea. This scientific name comes from the Dutch ichthyologist Mauritius Bozemans, who collected the type species, or the type specimens. And these guys are endangered in the wild, Sadly, because of obviously habitat loss, things like that, especially around those areas like Indonesia, pollution, a lot of the same things that affect a lot of animals in that area. But these guys are common in the aquarium hobby, where they're prized for their excellent colors, as you can kind of see here. Their color pattern is completely different from most forms of rainbow fish, where they kind of have half orange to reddish rear, and they have a blue head, kind of like that, and it kind of mixes out. It really gives them a beautiful look. They often grow to lengths of about 10 centimeters or longer, or 3 inches or longer, given the right food or water conditions. And like most rainbow fish, they are capable of adjusting their color intensity, and that actually shows that may be a sign of their mood or health. So the more intense means that they might be more aggressive or even healthier. So really good the more intense the color is quite good. And generally the more intense is seen at night, so they might be more active or more moody in the night, you could say. They're kept best in groups with as much or as more females than males. Due to their friendly nature and community, they can be kept with many other species of fish as long as they match the same kind of parameters and things like that. And they're relatively hardy fish that prefer weak alkaline pH conditions, and these guys can live with other rainbow fish, gouramis, guppies, swordtails, loaches, things like that. Though smaller freshwater shrimps may be viewed as prey, but other larger shrimps such as ghost shrimps and bamboo shrimps can. And always adult shrimps are added to first then the baby rainbow fish, and care must be taken to give hiding places to these shrimps if you want to keep them. And yeah, in terms of conservation, very similar to most other species, they can be over-collected sometimes. So I believe that they're mostly bred in captivity now. Things like pollution of local airways, habitat degradation, poaching, things like that, which affect a lot of species in Indonesia, along with being in such a restricted range that can hurt the population. But still a really, really awesome fish, and deserves all of its protection because it's so beautiful. Again, done by Leaf Buffsu and Free 3D. Next, we move on to a slightly more common fish. We've got the channel catfish. A really cool guy here. Let's see if we can find one. Oh, they're all going out for a swim. So this is the most common catfish in North America, and they're the official fish of Kansas, Missouri, Iowa, Nebraska, and Tennessee, and also informally referred to as the channel cat. They're the most fish species of catfish as well, with about 8 million anglers targeting them per year, believe it or not. And the popularity of these guys for food has led to a rapid expansion of aquaculture for these guys as well, and also have been introduced into Europe, Asia, and South America, where they're considered invasive species in many of these countries. So their natural habitat, they're native to the Neo-Arctic, so they're typically found in lower Canada, throughout the northern and like kind of eastern United States, and then even down into parts of northern Mexico, and even parts of Malaysia. They've been introduced to as part of Europe, and parts of Indonesia, where they tend to live in small and large rivers, reservoirs, ponds, natural lakes. And these guys actually are cavity nesters, so they lay their eggs in crevices, hollows, and debris that protect their eggs from swift currents and things like that. And in Canada, the species is larger. They're not exclusively limited to the Great Lakes watershed, and also the Lake Nipissing southwards. And these guys are not too distant looking from other species of catfish. They got the regular catfish look. They have very keen senses of taste, and they have pits in their nostrils that are very, very sensitive to sensing odors and things like that, very strong like that. And they also have these long bar jewels, as you can see here, that they use to feel and detect things, and helps with their taste as well. And they also have a web rumen apparatus that allows them to amplify their sounds that would not actually be perceivable. And we'll get into it. They're actually very good verbal communicators. We'll get into that. So, as a member of the American catfish genus, these guys have a top end size of about 40 to 50 pounds, or about 18 to 23 kilograms, with the world record being about 58 pounds, which was taken on July 7th in South Carolina in 1964. But realistically, anything over 9 kilos is a spectacular specimen, and they get average about 4 kilos. Even that's a good catch. So they're quite big in that regard. And in terms of their length, the average size they get between 12 inches or 31 centimeters, or 24 inches or 61 centimeters. So that's their kind of average length. But they can get a bit bigger than that, of course. And they often coexist with things like blue catfish, which is somewhat less common, but they tend to grow much larger. And the channel catfish grows longer, it actually increases in weight, and there's actually not a linear relationship with that, which is very interesting. There's been a little bit of study into that. So in terms of feeding, these guys have extreme taste perception. Here they're called the swimming tongue due to the presence of their taste buds all over their external body, so it allows them basically taste the water, which is pretty interesting. And in terms of adults, they will eat, even if they get over 45 centimeters or 17 inches, they will consume fishes such as yellow perch, sunfish. They'll also eat small snails, clams, crustaceans, snakes, frogs, aquatic plants, grains, nuts, small birds and mammals, insects, pretty much whatever they can get their mouths around when they get a chance. With younger catfish, even more consistently omnivorous, so eating larger parts. So they're quite generalist in that regard. That allows them to be so common. Another really cool thing about them is the communication. So these guys are adapted to limited light conditions, that include muddy waters, things like that. So they're able to communicate via sound. And these guys can use like all sorts of different alarm calls and also chemosensory calls that allow them to like smell communication, so things like pheromones, and is able to use it to identify the sex of another channel catfish by its smell, and also can tell its age, its reproductive state, and even its status in the social hierarchy, and which is really, really cool. And they also use signals as well. So they have an alarm call that they use. They release an odor that's a signal saying, hey, there's a danger, be careful. So they release it as an odor. And also sound production. They actually are able to produce sound by stridulation, and many will actually produce them by drumming. So they consist of like clicking or grinding of the body parts on the fish's pectoral fins and girdle, which drums them to make these sonic muscles that actually reverberate through their swim bladder, so that allows them to make sounds, which is really interesting. And due to the high density of water, these sounds can actually travel much further than they would on land, and it really helps them to be able to communicate with other fish. And in many catfish, they actually favor one fin to actually produce the sound than another. So in the same way you and I are like left and right-handed, these guys kind of have a left and right fin to produce these sounds with, which is very interesting. Really, really cool. And they're also very good at hearing because they are clearly have communicating through sound, so they've obviously developed a good way to hear. And the hearing ability is actually enhanced by the swim bladder, and because it reverberates sounds, and actually the volume of the swim bladder will actually change if the fish moves vertically, which can be considered a site of pressure sensitivity. So that means they're able to better detect sounds because of their swim bladder, which is really, really awesome. And they can actually communicate. Usually they use this pectoral stridulation as a means to antagonize kind of communication between predators and channel catfish. So they use these loud sounds to kind of startle predators, or even keep predators aware of them as well. So that's very, very interesting. I think that's rather cool. Very, very cool in this fish as well. Let's see if we can find one swimming around. There we are. Very, very beautiful, aren't you? So in terms of their fishing, these are guys are omnivorous, so they can actually be fed all sorts of different baits when you're trying to fish them. So that includes crickets, night crawlers, minnows, shads, drums, frogs, sunfish, hot dogs as well, things like that, pretty much whatever. And in terms of genetics, they're actually one of the few freshwater fish that have their whole genome sequenced. Along with like plecos and common carps and things like that, and it actually shows that these guys shows how these guys lost their scales, which is really interesting. In addition, the full mitochondrial genome has been available for the channel catfish since 2003, and other studies into genetic diversity, outcrossing, etc., has focused primarily on inbred lines and farm strains and things like that. But really cool to talk about domestic versus wild populations and compare them and it's really just interesting to talk about their genetics. Really, really awesome fish. Channel catfish is definitely very interesting. So this one was done by Leaf, Buffsuit, and Fishing Planet, along with the next couple. So quite excited to go through the next ones. So the next one is the Siberian tarman, or the Huchio tarman. I believe that's kind of their scientific name, Huchio tarman. Also known as the Siberian tarman, or the Siberian giant trout, or the common tarman. They've got a few names. So these guys are distributed through the Volga and Pekora rivers and basins, also found in the Amur rivers. They live around Russia, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, and China. And on a larger scale, they can be found in the Arctic, the Pacific drainage of Eurasia, and the Caspian Oceans. So quite a wide range. And these guys are not androgynous, so they do not show increased movement rates during the spawn season. And the average size of their range is about 23 kilometers or 14 miles, but some individuals have been seen to get quite a bit bigger in their ranges. So color will often vary a lot due to where they live, like geographically. And they're generally olive and you can see on the reddish brown on the tail here, so they don't look too different from your typical salmon, pretty much. They actually appear to be the largest salmon in the world, and they are being heavier on average than the largest North American salmon, the chinhook salmon. So most mature fish of these guys are caught at about 15 to 30 kilograms, or 33 to 66 pounds, with an average length of about 70 to 120 centimeters, or 28 to 47 inches. And the maximum length they've been reached is at about 150 to 180 centimeters, or 59 to 71 inches. And this maximum size is not assured, but there have been talks of ones getting over 2 meters long at like 105 kilograms, or 83 inches and 231 centimeters long. That's like the largest recorded size. But we don't really know. The largest verified one's about 45 kilograms, or 101 pounds, and about 150 centimeters, or 59 inches. And they've actually been known to reach ages of about 55 years of age, so quite a long-lived fish. And these guys, in terms of diet, they're mainly piscivores, so they typically eat other fish, that they will frequently eat terrestrial prey, such as rodents and birds, pretty much whatever they can get their mouths around. I imagine amphibians, whatever, really just whatever, small reptiles, really just whatever they can get their mouths around, like most predators. So these guys are also quite a well-known game fish, particularly by fly fishers, and catch and release and base hook. Barbus hooks have also been practiced in many areas to conserve their dwindling populations, and there's organizations to help recover these populations. And so people can still fish them but not kill them. And while the tarpon is sometimes illegally harvested sometimes, its low price and slow growth makes it more valuable as a game fish rather than a commercial fish. So basically, if anyone wants to kill one, they're either doing it illegally or they're doing it as an angler, but they should be protected because obviously some of their populations are at risk, so that's why they are considered vulnerable by the IUCN. So yeah, it's still a really, really beautiful fish. Nice big salmonid, a big awesome fish. So next we've got the Clair Muskie, another one done by Leaf Buff Sue and Fishing Planet. So this is kind of the last one in a regard. So this is a really, really cool fish here. So the muskie, also often called the lunge or just the muskie, or referred to it as the muskie. These guys are a large predatory fish that are native to North America, very similar to your pikes. These guys are closely related to other animals such as the northern pike or American pickerel. So this is one of the species that makes the tiger one that I covered last episode, I think. And these guys are quite cool. Like northern pikes and other aggressive animals, they have a body of an ambush predator with these long bodies that allow them to pursue prey and go quite fast. They have flat heads and dorsal, basically big and flat like that, big dorsal fins, things like that. In terms of their weight and body size, they can typically get about 28 to 48 inches, or 71 to 122 centimeters in length, and they reach about 15 to 36 pounds, or 6 to 16 kilograms in weight. There's some being reported to be up to 6 feet, or 1.8 meters, and almost 70 pounds, 32 kilograms, with some obviously records of being them a little bit larger. So these guys kind of have this light silver brown body with these stripes going down their back here. Vertical stripes that break up into spots sometimes, which actually helps to kind of break up their outline, and it can sometimes in more turbid water they can be absent. A muskie actually has 7 paws per side, and the pike usually has no more than 6 on the side of their mouth here that allows them to kind of sense things. So sensory paws they're called. And the caudal fins, as you can see, come to a sharper point than the northern pike. And in addition, these guys have no scales on the lower half of their occlura. So these guys are large muskies. They're considered trophies. And in places where they're not native, such as Maine, people aren't actually encouraged not to release the fish back into the water because of their negative impact on small fish species and trout and things like that. So in terms of their habitat, these guys are typically found in orthotrophic and mesotrophic lakes and large rivers around northern Michigan, northern Wisconsin, and northern Minnesota throughout the Great Lakes. They've been introduced into other places like the stock populations and reserves, things like that, but they can also be found in northern Canada, St. Lawrence River, Mississippi River, so quite a big range there. Very, very awesome, and they typically in their habitat prefer clear waters where they lurk along the weed edges or outcrops other structures where they can rest. They actually form two distinct home ranges during the summer. They have a shallow range and a deep range. So the shallow range is generally much smaller than their deeper range due to the shallow water often heating up. And they constantly patrol these ranges to search for available food and the appropriate conditions of water temperature. So in terms of their diet, these guys are ambush predators, so they will fight, run and bite pretty much anything they can. They're kind of the top predators in any body water they incur in, and they will eat large prey than most other freshwater fish. They eat a variety of fish present in their ecosystems. That includes other muskellunges, so that's basically cannibalism. But they will also eat insects, muskrats, rats, mice, frogs, or ducks. So pretty much anything big enough. And they're capable of taking prey up to 2/3 of their body length due to their large stomachs. And there have even been reports of them eating small dogs and even humans, though it's very likely that most of these reports are greatly exaggerated. In terms of behavior, they're somewhat gregarious, or sometimes gregarious. They form small schools in distinct territories, and they spawn in the mid to late spring, with some later than the northern pike, somewhat later than the northern pike, over shallow vegetated areas. The rock or sand bottom is preferred for spawning, so the eggs do not sink into the mud and suffocate. The male will arrive first and establish his dominance over territory. The spawning will last for about 5 to 10 days and occurs mainly at night. The eggs are negatively buoyant and they're slightly adhesive, so they adhere to the plants at the bottom of the lake. And soon afterwards, these eggs are abandoned by adults, where those embryos, which are not eaten by fish, crayfish, invertebrates, things like that, they will live in their yolk until they hatch, which is about 2 weeks, until their mouth is fully developed, and then they'll feed on copepods and zooplankton until they get big enough to eat fish. And juveniles will generally reach about a length of 30 centimeters or 12 inches in their first year of life. So as these guys are top predators, there are not very many predators of them, but they will get eaten by bald eagles, people, and they will often pose a threat to like bass, trout, and other birds of prey as well. And their low reproductive rate and slow growth render these populations highly vulnerable to overfishing. So this has prompted some jurisdictions to actually artificially help propagate these populations to help maintain them in otherwise unsustainably high rates for angling and things like that, and habitat destruction. So basically just pumping the environment so much full of muskies to help them survive. But there are a couple subspecies. This one is the Clair Muskie. So these guys are most common in Wisconsin, Minnesota, northwestern Ontario, and southwest Manitoba. So these guys are the most common one. And these guys also form the hybrid that I mentioned, the tiger muskie with the northern pike, since they're close relatives. And they are known to attack humans, and they're quite big, so they can give a pretty serious bite. But other than that, you should be pretty safe. But yeah, really, really awesome fish. Good tiger muskie. So this was done by Leaf Buffsoo and Fishing Planet, of course. So next we're moving on to some saltwater. We're moving out of the lakes and streams. We're now moving to the salt water. So this guy we've got here, this was done by Leaf Buffsoo and 3D Job Team. So this is the Longtooth Grouper. So this species of marine finfish, as you can see, this is a grouper, ray finfished. These guys are typically found in northwestern Pacific and Eastern Asia as well. So these guys, as you can see, have this quite elongate body with a standard length which is about 3 to 3.6 times its depth, with this dorsal profile with that big head, things like that, very similar to most other groupers. The larger adults tend to be dark grayish brown in color, and they have these blotches on their backs and things like that, though they can be absent in some individuals. They also have a covering of grey spots and things like that sometimes. The juveniles are typically a bit more pale yellowish in colour, similar to this, with 6 irregular diagonal bands going down with some regular spots as well. So this is kind of a little bit more juvenile coloration. The adults are typically a little bit darker in that regard. And there are 3 dark spots, as you can kind of see around here. And the published total length for these guys is about 136 centimeters or 54 inches. Although their most common length is about 60 centimeters, with a maximum recorded weight of about 33 kilograms or 73 pounds. So these guys are also considered vulnerable by the IUCN. So these guys are similar to at risk as most other fish. They're big fish with slow breeding. They have a restricted range. Often in these areas they can be overfished. Kind of those very similar pressures that a lot of these large fish have. And as I mentioned, their habitat, they're typically found in the Western Pacific, where they occur from southern Japan to Taiwan to across the coast of Asia to southern Korea and Hong Kong and southern China. So quite a wide range. And these guys typically like to live in rocky reefs and muddy substrates as well. So they're typically found in depths of about 2 to 200 meters or 66 to 665 feet. And they also found over coral and artificial reefs. And juveniles are typically found in shallow water at about less than 5 meters or 16 feet. And the biology of these guys is little known, but there are some kind of complications with their taxonomy. There's some people that have been splitting them into 2 species, which kind of confuses their taxonomy a bit, but really, really awesome. I do like a Longtooth Grouper, I think it is. Yeah, Longtooth Grouper. Obviously very not different to other groupers. They sit in ambush predators. They'll often attack large prey, things like that. Very, very cool. I love these groupers. I love groupers, man. I love their wide faces and their ambush predator lifestyles. They're just big, mean fish that I like. Really, really awesome. So next, moving on to some really cool fish. We've got a kind of ray here. We've got here, this one was also done by Leaf and Buffsu, but this was ported from Sketchfab. We have got the Shovelnose Guitarfish. So these guys are a ray in the family Rhinobatidae, and these guys reach their maturity at about 7 years old, or 8 years old, with males getting about 90 to 100 centimeters long, while the females are typically about 99 centimeters at that age. So they can live up to 11 years, and full-grown sizes are about 120 centimeters for males and 137 for females. So the general range is around Central California, south of the Gulf of California, though there have been some genetic and morphological variations that show that these guys are actually isolated from the rest of the population in the Gulf of California. And because of this, there's been lots of conservation work to protect this population as well and maintain its genetic distinctiveness. And these guys are often considered a primitive ray or primitively developed ray. They're not technically primitive, because that's kind of the wrong term to use, but they're an early relative of what would become the rays. So they don't have that big round, they don't have quite the big round flaps or discs that most rays have. They're kind of like a halfway point. Really good for their ecology. Such cool animals. And these guys also have magnetic particles in their vestibular receptors, and it's believed to be exogenous in origin, which is really cool. And this helps them with their spatial awareness, and actually may add their sensitivity to their receptors or movements, things like that. So also these guys, the visual system of these guys is more extensive than most other groups in the elasmobranchies. That includes sharks and rays and things like that. And they have multiple large projections connected to their brain in that regard, and almost the entire dorsal and ventral hypothalamus, which is part of the brain, is connected to that visual system. But they still maintain a similar lack of differentiation as in sharks. And there actually has been one documented case of one of these guys attacking a human, where the male guitarfish attacked the diver because it interrupted a mating experience. So he clearly got a bit angry with that. And it was actually first considered a shark because of its dorsal fin shape. And these guys are just so cool. In terms of the human interaction, these species can be caught on the surf, where these guys will feed on things like bivalves, mussels, things like that in that regard. They got these flat bodies that allow them to stay down the surface, so again, they'll feed on clams, bivalves, anything hidden in the bottom of the sediment they'll probably eat. And as food, these guys are commonly cut, mostly from mature individuals. They eat their trunk, tail, and loin, and they get referred to as shark steaks within markets, and they're usually served fried, but also in cocktails and kebabs and things like that. And dried specimens of all sizes can be sold in shell shops throughout California. But generally they are considered near threatened, so obviously being so big and slow breeding can affect their populations. But they seem to be doing all right in most regards. They're not in immediate fear of extinction. Just as long as there's good regulations that allow these guys to propagate, they should be fine. Really, really awesome fish there. So next we've got something so weird. I'm going to have to get into this. This is probably the oldest animal we've got in Planet Zoo so far. So this is Vinta Colachia. So this is an animal from This is the only thing we know about it really is that it's an animal and it's a deuterostome. So the deuterostome means second mouth. So that means it basically develops an anus. So that's kind of how we just distinguish it. So we know it has an anus. But this guy is from the Qilangzheng biota of China. So Cambrian animals. So very similar in ages and kind of things like the Burda shales and things like that. Another very famous site with lots of early Cambrian animals. So we literally have no idea what this guy is. We only know that it's a deuterostome and an animal. So it's actually classed as its own group. So that's very, very interesting. These guys have a body that's compressed, as you can see, in like almost equal length, these long sides here. And the anterior part, as you can see, quite rectangular, and they have this large carapace here. And they also have a large V-shaped mouth, as you can kind of see here, with this like keel going up here that's dorsally as well. And the tail-like posterior, as you can see here, they're got a little bit compressed, so it kind of looks like a fin that they probably use to swim around and around things like that. So really, really awesome. And paired openings connect to the pharynx and run down that side here, as you can see these holes here. And these features are often interpreted as gill slits, or very primitive gill slits, that allow them to obviously breathe in the water. And in terms of their sizes, they could get up to about 7 centimeters long, so they weren't the hugest things. Remember, this is the early Cambrian. This is when life really only started to become like free-floating and stuff like that, Ediacara, and this is basically when most of the animals that we knew today, they were kind of just coming around, you know, like shellfish and things like that. Really, really awesome. The Cambrian is just an amazing period in time. So what we think about its ecology, it's kind of assumed that they spend most of the time in the water columns, swimming around like this, and sediments from within their guts actually suggest that it was a deposit feeder, so it probably swam to and from favorable swimming sites or feeding sites. And some specimens have actually been found with the interprodent Utelodon dipelles attached to their tail segment that actually suggests that these guys may have actually buried in sediment with only the terminal section segment exposed. And nothing is known really about its taphonomy or anatomy. Suggests that it's a burrower, so it could be just how the specimen kind of died and covered and things like that. And actually, they think it was more likely a larval stage that would occasionally settle on the sediment and take advantage of the serendipity and feed whatever the host was discharging through its fecal matter. So basically, they were just following it and eating its poop. So that's kind of the fun way to put it. But yeah, this is such a really cool animal. It's just so weird. We had literally no idea about, like, we only know it's an animal. Really, really awesome. It's just one of the many interesting weirdos that lived in the Cambrian. So the Cambrian was a very important time. We have the Ediacaran, which was, we started just to see first life. We have animals like Dickinsonia and Virginia, I believe how you say that. And then as we get into the Cambrian, we start to see more animals swimming in the water column. We see things like Anomalocaris, Picia. We see the first like fish kind of things, the first animals with a notochord. And large predators such as Anomalocaris and Hallucigenia is another really cool animal from that time. But yeah, this is just a really cool animal and a really interesting addition to those early Cambrian animals that we just have no idea what they were like. But yes, so awesome. So this was done by Rick, GingerToast, and Joseba. So thank you all you guys for creating such an awesome Cambrian animal. I do love Cambrian animals. Nice to see them in Planet Zoo. But last but most certainly not least, we're going back to the future. So we're going all the way back to modern times from the Cambrian. So that's like a 500, 600 million year jump. We're going to have a look at some wonderful sea snakes. We have got here the banded sea crat. So these guys are also known as the yellow-lipped sea crat or the Columbrine sea crat. These guys are a species of venomous snake that are found in the Indo-Pacific oceanic waters, and they kind of get their name they don't really get their name, but they have these distinctive stripes, as you can see here, with a yellow snout, and you have this long paddle-like tail that they use for swimming. And these guys typically spend most of the time underwater hunting, but they return to land to digest, rest, and reproduce. And like a lot of these snakes, they have a very potent neurotoxin, and they use it to prey on eels and small fish. And because of its affinity on land, these guys are the most often kind of sea snake to encounter humans, but they're typically not aggressive and only really attack when they feel threatened. So you can see here the head of the yellow-lipped sea crat is black with these lateral rostral scales are divided as well. They have a sub-cylinder body, so their body is kind of taller than it is wide, and they're typically a shade of bluish grey, as you can see here, with this yellowish belly. as you can see, and they have these wide ventral scales as well. So you can see their belly's a little yellowish, where they get the yellow-banded sea crat, or the yellow-lipped. As you can kind of see here, the lips are kind of yellow. So the black rings also go along their body as well, and a little bit more brownish as well. The mid-body is often covered to about 21 to 25 longitudinal scales that are dorsal to that. These dorsal scales can actually distinguish it from different closely related species, such as the New Caledonian sea crat and other species very similar to that, which have typically fewer scales as well, or dorsal scales. And another adaptation for them to live out in the open ocean, these guys have a paddle-like tail, as you can kind of see here, that allows them to swim around and basically gives them that paddle-shaped tail allows them to swim better. So very, very awesome fish. Let's see if we can find another one. Let's have, I mean, not an awesome fish. They're snakes, but snakes are technically fish if you go into taxonomy. So on average, the total length for a male is about 875 millimeters, or about 2 feet 10 inches long, with a 13 centimeter long tail, and females are significantly larger, and they got an average about 1.42 meters, or 4'8", with a tail length of about 145 millimeters, or 5.7 inches. So in terms of their distribution and habitat, they're actually kind of one of the more widely distributed species of sea snakes. They're really only second to the yellow-bellied sea snake, which is basically found across tropical waters across the world. It's a very pelagic sea snake. So these guys are found around the eastern Indian Ocean and western Pacific. They can be found around India, the Bay of Bengal, Myanmar, Southeast Asia, the Malay Archipelago, and some parts of southern China, Taiwan, and Taiwan and Japan. The species is also common near Fiji and other Pacific islands, and there also have been vagrant individuals that have been recorded in Australia, New Zealand, and New Caledonia, with 6 specimens actually being found around the North Island of New Zealand around 1880 to 2005, which suggested to come from populations based in Fiji and Tonga. So what's really awesome about these guys as well is that they're one of the most common sea crats. They are the most common sea crat identified in New Zealand, a place which is almost famously talked about being free of snakes. But New Zealand does occasionally get snakes that are vagrant snakes that come up from or come down from the tropics. So this is the most common crat species that is typically found in New Zealand, and the second most common sea snake after the yellow-bellied sea snake, which I mentioned before, which is the most pelagic sea snake, and they are quite commonly found in New Zealand. And they're common enough to be considered a native species, so there might not be native populations. They are sometimes potentially found there, and they're considered native, and therefore they are protected by the Wildlife Act of 1953. So that's another really cool fact about these guys. Really awesome sea snakes, native sea snakes. So New Zealand technically has snakes, if you want to break it down like that. So in terms of their venom, these guys have a very, very powerful neurotoxic venom, which actually disrupts the synapses with all the allaclone receptors and things like that. A lot of malarkey stuff. In mice, this actually can cause lethargy, paralysis, and convulsions in quick succession before death. And dogs injected with lethal doses will actually have fatal hypertension before they die. Some variety of eels, which are the primary food source for these sea crats, they may have co-evolved resistance to their venom to obviously help them keep up. And the eels from the Caribbean, where the sea crats are not endemic, they actually died from injections of their venom. So it seems these guys kind of had been in an evolutionary arms race with these guys. So moray eels and stuff like that taken from New Guinea with populations of sea crats. These guys were able to tolerate large doses, so that's kind of evolution going up and showing you how it is. So that's so awesome to show that, like, how they evolved and directly evolved each other and how these animals interact. I think that's just so cool. So body adaptations for these guys have a pad-like tail that helps them swim, and these adaptations can actually be found in more distantly related sea snakes because of convergent evolution. But because of their differences in like crawling and swimming, these same adaptations impede the terrestrial motion of these snakes. Though on land, a yellow-lipped sea crat can still move, they typically only stay slightly more of a fifth of their swimming speed. And in contrary, most sea snakes are virtually stranded on land. So kind of like a beached whale on land sometimes. They can move around on land a little bit, but they're not very fast, and that's why they can probably be a little bit more defensive if you encounter them. So these guys, as I mentioned, they're semi-aquatic, so they tend to stay in the water, especially as juveniles, as on adjacent coasts and things like that, but adults will actually move a bit more further inland and spend half their time on land and in the ocean. Adult males tend to be more terrestrial, active during mating and hunt in the shallow water, so they require more terrestrial moving ability. Adult females, however, are less active on land due to during mating, and they tend to hunt in deeper water, which requires more aquatic movabilities. And because males are smaller, they can crawl and swim faster on land than the females. So they actually do okay on land. They can move inland, but juveniles tend to stay in the water. Especially males. If you find one on land, it's most likely going to be an adult male in the breeding season. But they spend most of the time in shallow or deep water, especially as juveniles. And when hunting, these guys frequently head into deep water far from land, but they return to land to shed their skin, digest their meals, and reproduce. Individuals show that they have specific home islands that they like to visit to, and when sea crats were relocated to different islands in the Fijian Islands, all recaptured individuals were able to find their way home in an average of 30 days. And these guys have actually been found on the tip of Borneo having tick infections, very badly actually, which is really cool. Well, it's not cool for them, but it's cool to learn about. But in terms of hunting, they're often hunting alone, but they sometimes actually do join in large numbers to have hunting parties of giant trevally and goatfish. So this cooperative hunting technique is similar to that of the moray eel, where these guys will flush out prey, and the trevally will kind of feed on the fleeing prey. When probing these crevices, these guys are usually able to observe predators and can be vulnerable. So these snakes can deter predators and like large fish, birds, and sharks by fooling themselves into thinking that their tail is head, because the color and movement of their tail is actually quite similar to that of the head. So the lateral aspect is kind of to match, they're very similar to the head, which is also very interesting. These guys, in terms of the diet, they primarily feed on a variety of eels, but they'll also eat small fish. These guys, as I mentioned, also exhibit sexual dimorphism, also in their hunting behavior as well. So with adult females being larger than the males, they prefer to hunt in deeper waters for the larger cougar eels, while adult males will hunt in shallow water for the smaller moray eels. And in addition, females will only hunt one prey item per foraging bout, while male will often hunt multiple times. And after hunting, these guys will return onto land to digest their prey. So in terms of their courtship and reproduction, these guys are oviparous, which means they lay eggs that develop outside the body. So each year during the warmer months of September through December, the males will gather on land, and then they walk water, and then they gently in these sloping areas during high tide, with males preferring to mate with larger females because they produce larger and more offspring. So when a male detects the female, he chases the female and begins courtship. With the females being larger and slower than the males, they kind of catch up easy, and the many male escorts will intertwine around her and things like that. The males will align their bodies with the female and rhythmically contract, which creates these massive mating balls that they have. And the revolting massive snakes can remain nearly motionless for several days. And at the courtship, the copulations will happen for about an average of 2 hours. And a female will lay as many as 10 eggs in a clutch, and these eggs will be deposited in a crevice where they remain until they hatch. And these eggs can be very rarely found in the wild, with only 2 nests being found definitely reported throughout their entire range. So yeah, these guys are considered least concern, but there are some interactions they have with humans. They're not, because these guys are commonly found in water, they don't spend much of their time on land. They're often encountered by humans as well, but they are frequently found in water intakes and exhaust pipes. They're often found either on boats or on land by people. That's where you're most likely to see them. They are also attracted to light and can be distracted by artificial sources of light. That includes hotels and things like that. Fewer bites of the species are actually reported compared to other species such as cobras and vipers, and they tend to be less aggressive and tend to avoid humans. If they do bite, it's usually in self-defense when they're accidentally grabbed, and most sea snake bites actually occur when fishermen attempt to untangle them from nets. So in terms of their cuisine, these guys in the Philippines actually court for their skin and meat, where their meat is smoked and exported for use in Japanese cuisine. And the related species, also the black-banded sea crat, is used in the Okinawan cuisine to make ibaru jinsu, which is a type of soup. which is kind of sad, but you know what Japanese are like, they'll eat just about anything. But yeah, this is a really awesome fish, if I do say so. Not a fish. I keep saying fish because I've got fish in the mind, but this is a really awesome snake, and it's really cool that we get to talk about it. So this guy was done by Leaf, Buffsu, and Armored Interactive, so really cool to see these guys in the game. Really, really awesome. So, yeah, I think this would be a great place to end the video. So, I really, really, really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified of anything. So, yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.